Today we're chatting with Deepak Ramola, who is the founder and artistic director of Project Fuel. Fuel stands for, F-U-E-L, stands for Forward the Understanding of Every Life Lesson. The organization collects life lessons from people of all ages and backgrounds around the world. And so, through his methodology, Deepak teaches human wisdom, which is super neat. In essence, Deepak collects these little bits of wisdom from all over the world, and that's what he's here to share with us today. So please take a minute to check out his TED Talk, his website, and to submit your own life lesson on his site. All of those links are in the show notes for this episode at barenakedbravery.com. And I just want to give you a heads up. Towards the end of this recording, we had some tech elves jump into the call. So if there's any weirdness, I blame the tech elves because, you know, when you're talking to someone from all the way around the world, things happen. So it is a really great episode, and I'm so happy to introduce you to Deepak Ramola. You're listening to Bare Naked Bravery, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Emily Ann Peterson. As a singer-songwriter, author, teaching artist, and creative entrepreneur, I encounter some really fascinating stories. I'm on a mission to reveal the depth and width of bravery and its benefits to creatives like yourself. More than ever today, our world needs bravery, unique bravery, from everyone. This is the place where you find it. There is no script or censorship today because that's how these facets of Bare Naked Bravery are in real life. So if you're listening with little ears nearby, please know that some episodes may contain mature language and subject matter. One of the easiest ways you can share bravery with the world is to send this episode to a friend or two. Send them an email, text, or tweet, tag them in one of my Instagram posts, my handle is Emily Ann Pete, or leave us a review on iTunes. It takes seconds and can be done from your phone right now. Again, we need more bravery in the world, so let's be brave together. So, Deepak, you are here with us today, and we're going to talk about your Project Fuel and life lessons, and why are you collecting life lessons?
You know, Emily, first of all, thank you for having me. And to answer your question, I think because somebody should. You know, according to statistics, 60 billion people have lived on Earth. And if you Google human wisdom, you will find a bunch of intellectuals pouring down their own thoughts and processes. But there is no information, there is no philosophy that we have that comes from normal, common people, not artists, not thought leaders, not change makers, not aristocrats, but really a sweeper or a cleaner or a maid or a mother who lived in the 16th or the 17th century. Would you ever know what she felt about life? And not what Michelangelo or what Socrates or what, all the other inspiring philosophers said. So I think most of the philosophy that we read has been taught, and of course lived also by the individual itself, but has not been so lived to a point that it becomes credible and applicable universally. So when I had the first thoughts, I'll tell you where the inspiration came from. My mother was pulled out of school in grade 5. And because she never really had a chance to go to school, because her grandmother didn't want her to, back in 60s in India, girls were really not given the opportunity. But I never believed growing up that my mother never went to school. She is the smartest person I know. Like, she has the best arguments in a fight. She always has the mic drop moments. She is always the best advisor on relationships. She is always the best motivator, cheerleader in the room. She's very good with finances. Like, she knows where to spend her money. And I thought that's all they teach you in school, how to communicate, how to manage your finances, how to manage your time. And one day, I was 14 years old, I was angry, and I went to her and I said, you are the biggest liar in the world because you say you didn't go to school. But everybody I have gotten a chance to meet in school that's what they teach us in school, how to live life. And my mother laughed and she said, I didn't go to school, but I've been paying attention to everything life has been teaching me. And that sort of was a revelatory statement for me, because I thought if she's learning simply by living, that means everyone who's living is learning something. And that kind of set things in motion. And here I am, like doing this for a living. And I cannot believe, like, people have not documented human wisdom before. So when I go to teach and they say, oh, what do you teach? Or, in airplane rides, when people turn to you and say, what class are you in? Because I look really young. So they say, have you graduated high school and all of that? I say, well, I teach. And they say, what? And I say, human wisdom. It's bound to raise eyebrows.
That is so funny. That is so funny. So you're collecting these life lessons because I think it's a phenomenal concept that just because people are change makers or have written a book and they're fancy or they have some sort of clout in the world, just because they don't have those things doesn't mean that they don't have wisdom or lessons for us to learn. One of the ones I was scrolling through was, I forget who it was or who you collected this wisdom from, but it made me chuckle. It was, when you're done with the jar, put the lid back on it.
5-year-old girl. Can you imagine? A 5-year-old girl in Mother Teresa's NGO almost 6 years ago. I had life lessons of only adults, like people like us, people above the age of 20 or 15 or whatever. And I said, I have to ask a kid what his or her life lesson is. So I look at this girl piercingly at her and I say, what is your life lesson? And without battling an eyelid, she says, when you're done using the jar, remember to close the lid. And she just goes at play. And I'm like, oh my God, that is boom. Like, that is the biggest philosophy ever revealed to me, because that life lesson alone, Emily, to be honest, has resolved for at least 1,200 people their issues, or has given them a perspective. I was in Nepal post the earthquake, and a psychiatrist from a mental health hospital in Nepal heard that life lesson and said that he found the answer of why his wife was asking him to divorce him, because he was not giving closure to his work life when he came home. So he said, when I am done using the jar, I really need to put a lid on it. 5-year-old, and that's exactly what you said. It's the wisdom that we celebrate or we cherish or we relish into comes from a very cream layer of society, and everybody else below it is discounted for as people who don't know better or who cannot articulate better. But that's not true. Not everybody in the world can be a scientist or an artist or a writer or a podcast host or an educator or a poet or an app developer in today's world. So I think to have lived a good life, to have had an understanding of that life, and to be willing and brave enough to share the understanding or the condensation of that life with others is a good enough reason that you should be remembered by generations to come.
I totally agree. Now, I think so you're calling us today from India.
Yes.
And I'm here on the West Coast of the US. So this is a global episode right now. Not our first, but every time we get to do one of these country boundary connections, I love it because it's so fantastic just in general.
It's also proved long distance phone calls and relationships work.
It's true. So I find it really funny I find it really fitting that you are in India and you are using common wisdom from common man. And you guys are known for having caste systems and levels of society.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, even as creatives, which is the majority of our listeners are people who are creatives, there's like a caste system even in industries. Like, I don't deserve to be speaking up because I don't have enough experience, or I don't deserve to be heard because of XYZ. What, in your experience, in your cultural experience, what is it that you know about speaking up when you probably shouldn't, or when people think that you probably shouldn't?
That's a brilliant question. I think caste system in any, like, whether that it's in a cultural sense, whether that's in an industry sense, is a very mentality driven thing. Caste system is a mentality. It's not disease. It's not a physical actuality. It's what people see and perceive of each other. And what it leads to is labeling. Now, the part of the question where you say, how do people avoid that, or how to overcome that, or how I've seen it, is when you accept the labels people have for you. if I call you a dumb, ugly, whatever person or boring person, and you accept that, that is when you will live the caste system. That is when you will become the brand ambassador of prejudice, as I call, you know. And if you are living it, if you're accepting what is being thrown at you, that means you accept it and you have space for it in your life. If you, I won't say resent it, but if you do what you are supposed to do, if you feel like you have a compelling story to tell, if you feel like you need to have a conversation, if you feel like your voice must be heard, that it means you're automatically fighting, or you're automatically rising above the conservative and questioning the conventional, for that matter. And in my own context, for example, the caste system or the mentality of the caste system prevailed. I had a very petite voice. I almost sounded like a girl all through school, and I was heavily bullied for it. But I remember there was this one life lesson of a friend come teacher called Own Your Story. She came one day to me, I was sobbing in her English class, and she said, don't worry about what they say, own your story. And I said, oh, what is my story? And all of that. And she said, whatever it's your story, you can't do much about your voice tonality. Why don't you do something about the content it speaks? And I said, yes, and she said, you have a great modulation. Deepak, I think you can be a good orator. By 8th standard, I was participating in debate competitions and all of that. And it stayed with me through and through and has been my biggest piece of advice for everybody else. Own your story. Own your story. No matter what you sound like, what you look like, bring that to the room with you. Because, vulnerability is considered a weakness, and we've all heard it's a strength and all that. But I think owning your story helps you acknowledge that you're not alone. Every single compliment you've ever received, you bring that to the room with you. Maya Angelou used to say, every time I climb on stage, every single story I know, every uncle I had who praised me, every little girl who clapped for me in the auditorium, they are with me. And people will dumb it down to say, oh, she has charisma. No, what she has is backup of 2,000 people standing on stage, which are invisible to people in that given moment of time. So I think we don't have to actively pursue, chase, relent, fight, or criticize caste system. All we have to do is be the best version of ourselves, en route meeting our highest potential, and everything will automatically get taken care of.
I totally, yeah. And the notion that you are the one accepting the system, you're equally partaking in it. It is not, you're not a victim of it. You are choosing to participate in it.
Absolutely.
That is a really powerful point. And I think for those of us that are in industries that have a perceived system or an order or a ranking of popularity or value, then, if you participate in that ranking, you're half of the system.
Exactly. And for example, I'll give you another quick example. For example, I am very young. I'm 25 years old, but I started teaching at 17. So you can imagine a 25-year-old guy starting teaching to at 17, looking 14. And even till today, just last week, I was at a conference with more than 5,000 people. As the panel of three, really, two other esteemed guests of India, this innovator, this social entrepreneur. And one of the panelists couldn't digest the fact that I was on the same panel. And he was referring post the conversation as well. So many times, he made snide remarks of how young I was. And he thought that I was being accompanied by my father. My father was the speaker. I was the son tagging along. And I have heard that in last 8 years enough number of times. And people have said, you're too young to teach human wisdom. You're too young to be a professor. You're too young to speak. And you're too young and this and that. But then I think if I would have stopped at 17 thinking, oh, I am young, I should wait till I'm 30 and I have a really big beard to prove my, my longing and love for sharing knowledge and stories, I think I would have submitted to the mentality of the caste system. To still continue to show up in classrooms with people double my age, and because I love it, not because I have to prove someone wrong, is the measure of saying, if you do not accept it, you're always riding against the tide, and that's fine. You'll be all right.
Yeah, that's really, yes. So I'm curious. So you have your hands in a ton of different projects. Mm-hmm. The one that you first told me about was, oh gosh, I forget the
Whiteboard Project.
Yes, please tell me more about this project because that sounds fascinating.
Oh, it is in every sense of the way. So, in a state in India called Uttarakhand, where I come from, we are facing a severe issue of migration because there are remote villages. There are almost 16,000 plus villages, and a lot of villages do not have roads, do not have electricity, do not have education, medical facilities, even livelihood and employment. So, people are now migrating to bigger cities, and Uttarakhand is really at the center point of it in that context because more than 1,300 villages have gotten abandoned. So imagine the houses remain the same in an entire town, but like nobody lives in it. So I wanted to do something about that to bring attention back to it, but do it artistically, not in an activism format. And we picked one such village which is 600 years old. It's called Sword. And it only has 12 families out of the 200 plus families that used to live in it. And what we did under this project is I traced back every single family who used to live in the village. So I went first to the village, traced down which house belongs to whom, asked from people, did a research on where whose base now migrated to, interviewed each of those families, collected their life lessons, collaborated with an amazing Indian wall muralist called Purnima Sukumar and a bunch of other crazy volunteers, brought them all together to the village. And for 1 month, we painted every single house with the stories that came out of the interviews from the families, and then painted the life lessons in text format onto the walls of those houses. So now this becomes the first village of life lessons. It's literally like an art gallery come classroom. You can go from any lane to any lane, stop at any house, and even if nobody lives there, you know what those people stand for and what their lives have been over the years. So that's the project.
That is beautiful. Ugh. I think that's so fascinating. The migration issue is fascinating in and of itself, but then the fact that you would go so deeply into this research to find these life lessons is amazing. What were some of the life lessons that you remember from that project?
Oh, some really amazing one.
I'm putting you on the spot. I'm sorry.
No, absolutely. I do remember many of the life lessons I document. And one was that, I don't know how it's out English translation, but a really old man, like almost 85, said, a house that doesn't have the wisdom of the old, the passion of the young, and the young or the entertaining energy of the childlike always remains in some form incomplete.
Wow.
He said that, which was very, very nice. And then there was another person who said, the river of the mountain and the youth of the mountains, nowhere, not necessarily just in India, but anywhere in the world, doesn't necessarily are in use of it or come off as advantage to the mountain. See, the mountain water goes, and it nourishes the cities, the civilizations along the way. So it melts the snow in the mountains and goes down. And same is happening with the youth. They rise in the mountains, they grow up or are born in the mountains, and then they trickle down and have a drain effect and go and populate the cities and nourish them.
Yeah.
It's very nice. And then there were some really simple ones, like drink water. Like have enough water every day, because mountain people have, of course, figured it out more than us city people. And also a lot of people spoke about try to stay like a woman. I said, what have you learned in your life? And she was 55 and she said, put your phone away for an hour every day. And she said, I'm so troubled by it. Like this generation is growing up on technological dependence of communication. So while the communication is faster, it's not richer or deeper, but, in that sense necessarily. So those were some of the things that came out of the village like that are talking about.
That's fantastic. Before we get back to the conversation, I have just got to tell you about this awesome group of people I am honored to call my patrons. Every time a new song of mine is born, the first recording of it is tenderly revealed to this devoted group. They get to hear all my new material in its raw, fresh, vulnerable state and know that they are helping me do what I do. Because at the end of the day, they just want me to keep doing what I'm doing, and any reminder of that completely floors me every time I think about it. All of this support occurs through a website called patreon.com, which was started by this guy named Jack Conti, whose very attainable mission is to help every creator achieve sustainable income. In a world where artists are seen scrambling for pennies squeezed out of an expiring and broken economic system, the folks at Patreon have brought us back to what all creators used to do. Patronage is not new. But unlike a lot of popular crowdfunding sites out there, Patreon enables creators to receive support on a regular basis. The great thing is that my patrons set their pledges to whatever amount they feel comfortable with, which means patronage fits every budget out there. And of course, you can cancel at any time. If you're a creative type who's interested in joining Patreon yourself, I'd be happy to answer any questions I can. Just shoot me an email anytime. Bottom line, my patrons help me do everything I do, but better and more frequently. If you're interested in becoming a patron of mine, go to barenakedbravery.com/Patreon, Patreon. Are you looking to do more of those kinds of village projects, or what other projects are you working on right now?
So I am going to be doing more village. The Whiteboard Project is going to be an ongoing project, and I'm planning to do one every year. It's going to be an annual sort of a program, because you have to live in the village, and before that you have to do 3 months of research. So that's a lot of time and a lot of people to mobilize.
Yeah.
So we're going to do another. But right after we finish this village, we've gotten so many invitations from villages all across. Somebody from the Canadian Tribal Authority or something called or emailed one of my colleagues and said that we would love to replicate this with the tribals in Canada and the indigenous tribe there.
Wow.
There's a possibility of it doing in various villages in India itself. There is a Sanskrit school, in the state's first Sanskrit school, that is being kind of renovated, and they reached out and said we would like to do. So we have to see feasibility and time as well of that. The other project that I'm really excited about, so at Project Fuel, we do something called the Masterpiece Tour. It's an annual flagship program, and I travel anywhere between 6 days to 90 days to a community outside of my own to help with the methodology of life lessons. So the first year it was within India with students in Punjab. The second year we went to Nepal post the earthquake. And last year I was with mostly refugees, primarily displaced by the conflict in Syria. So I spent 90 days in refugee camps in Europe, in 5 countries, and documented life lessons of refugees, which you can see on the website as well. This year's Masterpiece Tour, it's actually an announcement because I just kind of formalized it last week. So it's going to happen mostly in Pakistan.
Oh, fun.
And India shares a colored history and colored relationship with Pakistan. So it's going to be exciting. I'm trying not to delve more into the political aspects of the two countries, but just to celebrate and understand learnings and life lessons of the youth, because the youth of both countries is going to build South Asia in that respect. So what are people learning, and what the cultural and artistic scene is growing up to be? So that's what I'm looking forward to doing in December. And the project before that, this is something you'll really like, and so will your audience. There's a girl called Shrishti Bakshi. She runs an organization called Arrow Bright Crossbow, and she was based in Hong Kong, Indian girl working with a big corporate multinational. And every time somebody said, can we go to India for holiday, but is it safe? She was tired of those questions, that is India safe for women? It is, I mean, as most popular belief media plays out to be, that you cannot step out. No, there are a lot of people who come from all around. But she really wanted to ensure that whatever little is left, the gap to be filled, can be done. So she is walking from the south of India to the north of India. So from Kanyakumari to Kashmir for 260 days, 3,600 kilometers, and for women's safety and women awareness. And I'm collaborating with her to do workshops on women empowerment and body image and financial literacy and digital literacy along the way. So that starts on 15th September. So I'm going to be walking at various points with her, doing workshops. So that's something exciting. And we are launching an online store, which is the most amazingly exciting part. So now your audience or people around the world who appreciate Project Fuel can have actual physical Project Fuel merchandise. So we have life lesson journals that you can document your own wisdom with. We have amazing life lesson jars. So imagine having a mason jar on your table filled with wisdom around the world, and you can pick one story each day and read it. And then there are amazing other products in it. So that's the new.
Oh, that's going to be good. So you are so busy.
And
I'm really impressed by not only just how much you've gotten done in the last just 3 years alone, which I want to talk to you about some of those projects, but I'll table that for now because my main question right now is for those of us who have big visions like you and I, what life lesson and advice do you have to offer us to keep dreaming big and keep the sustainability of those dreams rolling forward?
okay, wow. I have two really brilliant life lessons for all those who are struggling with that. One comes from this phenomenal lady in Liverpool, Marlo Hermson, and her life lesson is consider your intuition to be a valid argument. So whenever you're starting something, whenever you are just saying, that's a good idea, should I do something about it? Or, I don't know how much people will respond to it. Consider your intuition to be a valid argument. So, and how she learned it is a fascinating story. Growing up, when she would sit on the dinner table with family and family decisions would be taken, and the father would say, okay, we should buy that TV set. What do you guys think? And the brother would say, according to scientists, the screen is very good. The quality of this cable network is nice and all of that. And if Marlu would say, I intuitively feel we should go for that one because I think it'll be fun, it would be considered as valid an argument, like all the scientists on one end and your intuition on one end. And she said, I grew up believing that intuition was as important as research and data and metadata and all of that. And I consider that an amazing insight into how we can live our lives if we consider our intuition to be a valid source of information, coming to us. So that's one, when you're starting out. After that, when people become negative, when you start and there is mocking, there is a liability of relationships trying to be nice to you and biased context of criticism. The other life lesson comes from a girl named Sophia, I think Sophia, from again, UK. She said, try to relate to everyone with a sense of humor. So when people criticize you, I always think of, wow, how funny is that? Like someone would think of such a serious thing as such a ridiculous way. So I mean, when people say, "Oh, your nose is so big," I always would think, and in context to her stories, she would say, "Wow, I cannot believe like I have an amazing nose, and someone can actually think of it as a bloated potato. Like that's quite nice to know. Or someone would call it a balloon, and she would laugh her guts out instead of being like, "Oh my God, my nose was called potato today in class." And I thought that's such a good tool and a weapon to use against criticism and all the negativity that comes into your way. Try to relate to everyone with a sense of humor. It's an antidote.
So good.
And the last and the third is have consistency and enthusiasm. Nobody in the world, you can lack a little passion, you can absolutely lack complete skill and talent. All that can be acquired. If you lack enthusiasm, if you're not innately, ferociously brave heart and cheering yourself on and consistent with that, you won't last long. And I mean, that's the unfortunate truth. So brave yourself up and shout out from the rooftops if you have to keep yourself motivated.
Yeah. I think that consistency is really important. Yeah. Oh, good stuff. Okay. So now I want to dive into some of these projects that you've done because I'm sure that you have some really good, juicy things to say about it. So with this project with the Syrian refugees, tell me a little bit more about like the state of mind that some of these refugees were in and where were you when you were interacting with them?
Okay. So it's like, we are painted or we are shown a picture on popular media, whether that's social media, whether that's news broadcast or newspapers, of a bunch of people on a boat drowning in the Mediterranean Sea. And you will always see that headline with how many died. My intention with this masterpiece tour with the refugees was to see the ones who survived, what made them get onto the boat in the first place, and how do they plan to overcome the obstructions and the depression and all the challenges that they face to rebuild a life. It's like being reborn. And are they hopeful about it? And you won't believe, Emily, in 5 countries, I met thousands of refugees in refugee camps. And on an average, 80% of them were hopeful. Otherwise, nobody would put themselves from a bombing situation onto a boat if they were not hopeful. So by default, everybody is hopeful because they know there is a chance. And when you think there is a chance, you know there is a possibility for something good to happen to you. And if you're moving with that mindset, even if you are in a sea with 180 people crammed up in a 50 people boat, you know something will good come out of life because you are fighting it out, you know. And so the most refugees I met were normal people. As when I was on the tour, a lot of people, would message me and say, "How does a refugee look like?" Or, "What does a refugee sound like?" And a lot of refugees told me that themselves. They said, when people hear the term refugee, we come across as aliens to them. And they forget that they might be in the same position if something really terribly wrong, God forbid, happens in their country tomorrow, It all needs a dropping of a bomb or announcement of a war. Everybody is as palpable to the reality of displacement. And somewhere we all fear homelessness. If I put you up from the West Coast and say you have to move to India, you know nobody here, and you have to live in the small city that I am living in, you will be displaced too. Maybe not from war, but in some context, and you will fear the homelessness that would you know people. So most of these refugees brought with them an entire sense of having a life experience and building a life again for themselves. And they were very hopeful, very empathetic. I have never walked out of a refugee tent because I lived in most refugee camps with them, along with the 3 other members of my team, the documentarians and the relation person who was going. We never stepped out of a tent without having tea or without having food. So even when they would get the charity tin cans of beans and that sale bread, they would say, "Hey, share a loaf with us." And I'd be like, you have literally very less for yourself. And they said, "It's lunchtime. Let's just worry about lunchtime." we are coming from a bombing situation. We don't worry about dinner. We worry about now. So eat with us.
Wow. I think I listened to an interview on the radio the other day where they were interviewing 6 different refugees from 6 different countries, all who had been in the US for various lengths of time. And one of the things that was really a really wonderful reminder for me personally was that none of them wanted to be in the US to begin with. They were grateful, of course. They were glad that they have the life that they do now, even though it was hard to get here and all that stuff. But all of them never wanted to leave their country to begin with. And that was really fascinating reminder of truth for me as I was listening, because we see in the States, and I think in a lot of Western countries, we are seeing there's the argument that refugees are a burden to our societies or that they're trying to take up our resources, or they're being greedy or something, which is kind of crazy in my opinion. However, I think it's a really good reminder to acknowledge that these people, they never wanted to leave their country to begin with. They were being forced out, which is what makes them refugees, right? So what were some of the life lessons that they taught you?
Yes, I would like to start with that first that comes to my mind was a guy named Hadi. He was 27-year-old. And, he said, I'll tell you the story first. So he said that when he was in Syria, he's a Syrian refugee. When he was in Syria, he would watch the news or the YouTube videos of people getting on a boat. And he would say, these people are crazy. Like, why would you risk your life? Like, I know, it's, of course, the situation is so bad that you have to put yourself out, but I would never do that. Like he said, I would never do that. But then when the war came to his area, his town, his neighborhood, his lane, his house, he had no other option. So he told me, he said, the day I decided I'm going to go, I checked into a hotel. I took a nice shower because I knew I would not have a shower for days to come. I watched the videos and I said, I was one of those people who said, these people are crazy getting on a boat and I'm going to do so in 15 minutes. So he went out of the hotel. He met the smuggler. He was on the boat and he said, there were different people of various shades and all of that. And he said to me, it might sound crazy to you, Deepak, but the truth is when I was on the boat in the Mediterranean Sea, rather than feeling anxious and scared, I was so grateful because I have never stepped out of my house, my comfort, my office job, and I was in a sea. As far as I could see, there was water, and there was a bunch of people stacked on a boat, and nothing else but beautiful shades of blue. So he said, I forgot for a moment I was a refugee and I had to rebuild a life. And he said, in that moment, everybody wanted to comfort each other. They started singing. So imagine all these people together risking their lives, singing songs from their ethnicity and their own cultural traditions, making it finally to the shore. And he said, what I realized from that moment is that, and he got off the shore and his friend said, Hadi, you don't look like a refugee. You have a stud in your ears. You have a really bright red cap and you have a really nice t-shirt on. Just change it or get muddy or something. And he said, why? And he said, you don't look like a refugee. And he said, what does a refugee look like? I forgot to research about that. And in that moment, he realized that it's so important to save your individuality at any given point in life when you will risk something. People would expect you to change or evolve into a more magnificent or a more subdued personality of yourself. But most importantly, what he learned is be happy no matter what happens to you and no matter where you are, which I think is such an important life lesson, right? That you are in a boat, you're singing with people, and you know you might not survive. But just to be appreciative of that sea and ocean and all of that takes courage. The second life lesson came from an Eritrean refugee in Hungary that I met in a central park. And his life lesson was as simple as, he said in a very baritonish voice, I'll try to imitate him. He said, I've been through many problems or many challenges, but my lips don't know that. They always smile. And it was so nice to know, like this the way he put it. He said, I have been through many difficulties in my life, but my lips don't know that. So they always smile. And he said, that's become a way of life for me. And it was magnificent. And one woman said about how if you were not born with empathy as a skill, consider learning it now, because it's quite important, you know.
Oh, these are so good.
Yeah, and the politically charged times that we live, whether you live in the US with the political scenario or with all that is happening, and whether we live in India with all that is happening here, I think it's an important reminder that if you don't think empathy was your skill or a God's gift to you, then demand and have it by now.
Yeah, that's amazing. Oh, this has been so wonderful and rich. I'm so grateful that we've gotten a chance to do this and chat about this.
Thank you.
I'm really looking forward to seeing what unfolds for you in this next year with your next big tour. I'm really excited about it.
Thank you.
Please hop in the Facebook group so that we can keep in touch with you and everything that we're doing. I know that we would all really love that. Where can we find out more information about you and what you're doing?
Okay, so you can head to www.projectfuel.in for writing, sending your life lesson. I think the first important thing to be part of the community and to enrich this ecosystem is to send your life lessons. That's the basic minimum requirement. We're actually in the process of collecting 1 million life lessons by 2018. So as many life lessons are good. I really want to have a 1 million life lesson database by 2018. So everybody can send their life lessons. You can read life lessons on the website. Yeah, just read more about our work, about my work at Project Fuel.
Oh, I love it. I love it. This is so fantastic.
Thank you.
So it is, when we're recording this, it's evening here. So I'm sending you the sun so that you can continue with your day and the rest of your morning.
Thank you.
Thank you again so much for doing this. I am so appreciative of this.
Thank you so much, Emily. It's been such a joy ever since I heard first about you and your work and your podcast.
As we mentioned earlier, your brave takeaway from today's show is to hop on over to Deepak's website. You can find it by going to barenakedbravery.com. It's in the show notes of this episode. And submit your own life lesson. Like he mentioned before, he's got a goal of collecting 1 million life lessons. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you specifically have some to add. So after you officially submit your life lesson, I want you to hop into the Bare Naked Bravery community group in Facebook and share it with us too, because we want to hear it. We want to know what your wisdom is to offer the world. We would generally just love to hear all about your favorite parts of today's episode. So go ahead and find Deepak Ramola and myself on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and all the other places. I just ask that you tag us so that we can say hey and cheer you on and see what you're up to. If you are digging the music in today's episode, that's because it's brought to you by Lee Rosevere. To find out more information about all the artists, musicians, and other sponsors of the show, and even to see a reading list and a library of resources, go to barenakedbravery.com and have at it. I am looking forward to being with you next week because we have some really good things in store for you. Until then, I have one message. It's the same as always. It's this: be yourself. Be vulnerable, be imaginative, be improvisational, be brave, because the world needs more of your bare naked bravery.